And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I'm Michael DeLana, and today I am talking with Dustin Riechmann, a good friend of mine. Dustin, thanks for being here, buddy.
So good to be here, Michael. Going to have a lot of fun with our conversation today.
It is. It's going to be a great conversation. So Dustin and I, we were in a mastermind group together. My audience knows I talk about mastermind groups a lot, but it's really important to be in them to learn, but also to meet people like Dustin. And he and I have done some webinars together and different things, and probably will be together for many, many years because he does something that I don't really do. I applaud it. I love it. I'm passionate about it, but I don't do what he does. So Dustin can help you grow your business by becoming a guest on podcasts. So you don't have to have your own podcast like I do and like he does, but you can. I don't think you have a podcast, do you?
I actually don't have a podcast.
He doesn't have a podcast
fun
because
fact.
you don't need your own podcast. And he's going to tell you why that is the fact, how he can explain the whole thing of the value of being a guest on other people's podcasts. So Dustin, tell us about how in the world did you get to this point, and then we'll unpack it from there, okay?
For sure. Yeah, it's kind of a funny niche, I guess. And the way I got there was really through the creation of 3 different businesses. So I'll make this pretty brief, but my background professionally was engineering, and I did that for 15 years. While doing that, I created some online businesses, the first of which was called Engaged Marriage, and it grew out of marriage ministry. I'm a Christian like you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Marriage ministry, my wife and I were doing, wanted to bring that online in the heyday of blogging in 2009. So that where I cut my teeth with digital marketing, learned how to create websites and do all those things. Wrote a book, did some speaking. That parlayed itself into digital marketing. And I felt called away from engineering between 2015, and it finally actually took place in 2017. And the way I made that happen, because my wife was a stay-at-home mom and we have 3 kids, and I was leaving all my professional stuff behind, was through marketing consulting. So I just started taking on a bunch of clients, learning a bunch of things, and applying a bunch of different industries, local and online. One of those local businesses was a butcher shop. That local butcher and I hit it off. We were having success marketing his local business, and he said, "Hey, I've got this product. I'd like to bring it online. Can you sell stuff online?" I said, "I sure can." So I created my first Shopify store in 2018. We ultimately became business partners in a company called Fire Creek Snacks, and so that's how I got into that e-commerce world. And then I was really focused on that for a couple of years and did a lot of traveling, was going to trade shows, selling in the brick and mortar, and while also building our online presence. And then, something happened in 2020 where all the trade shows stopped and all the stores were closed, and I lost half my marketing clients because they were like a dentist, a restaurant, and they were all closed.
Yeah, exactly.
So that required some creativity to get through. And so where this finally gets to podcast guesting is I in summer 2020 got on my first podcast as a guest to talk about Fire Creek Snacks, talk about our business story, and love the experience. Sold some meat sticks, so that was cool, and then had some great relationships come out of that. So I started repeating that process for myself, and then had a lot of inbound interest from people saying, "How'd you get on that show? Really liked your story, really cool offer," those sort of things. And so in 2021, I had 21 one-to-one coaching clients that just were all organic, and it became referrals. And then ultimately that led to leading groups, and now my own mastermind. And my own mastermind is all about podcast guesting profitably. And so that's the engineer, marriage, meat sticks, marketing, and podcast guesting. So
you're the meat stick marketing guy. I love it. So Fire Creek Snacks, if you haven't had one, you need to go get one. They're available all over the place, websites, your famous local stores, wherever. But anyway, That's not what we're talking about. But there's a neat story. I'm not going to have you tell it about how from Fire Creek Snacks, you were on a podcast, and from there you got into one of the nation's largest retailers for Fire Creek Snacks because of a podcast interview. You were on somebody else's podcast. The power of podcasting. Let's talk about this from a business owner perspective, because business owners they're busy. They're always looking for marketing. This is not a next shiny object. What this is a strategy of being featured as an expert, because experts are interviewed. And talk about why there's such a void. Why is there such a need for good guests? Because hosts like me, we need guests like you. So help a business owner understand the value they can bring to a host and why it's so impactful in their business.
Sure. Yeah. So the relationship we're trying to form here is win-win-win. right? And so it's you as the brand owner, the business owner. The win for you is obviously exposure to your target market, building relationships with the host, who by default is an influencer in your market, and then some other strategies we can talk about with how to actually make direct sales from it. But you have a lot of benefits. The audience should also get a lot of benefit, and that comes in the form of you teaching, your stories, your emotional connection. Like you can provide inspiration and education. And then for the host, to your point, they need good guests because they have content. Every week they might be putting out a show. They don't want things to be repetitive. They want some fresh ideas and some fresh faces. And they also value these relationships, right? So that's the win-win-win kind of prerequisite to the strategy, the way that I approach podcast guesting. Like no one loses, no one's taking, everyone's winning. Yeah. And really what you're doing, the service you're giving to that host and providing value to the audience is you're bridging a content gap. So I don't know if you've had people on, Michael, who have talked about podcast guesting. Even if you have, I talk about it differently. And I have my own strategies and I have my own framework that we'll talk about. And so this is a unique opportunity for you to have this topic covered in a new and unique way for your audience. And you need content because you're doing an interview-based show. So hopefully that's pretty easy for people to kind of bridge that gap in their brain. Like, okay, I get it. Like maybe I haven't thought of being on shows, but I've listened to them. I get a lot of insights. And yeah, what I do is actually could be interesting to the right audience with the right host. And that's really what we pinpoint in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I look at my audience, a lot of them are authors, a lot of them are wannabe authors, a lot of them are experts. And you're always trying to get your message out. I talk to people all the time, Dustin, who are like, well, I post on LinkedIn all the time, or I post on Facebook, or I write a blog, or I do an email.
Right.
Great. But so does everybody else.
Right.
How do you take yourself and elevate yourself in the eyes of your audience? One fast, easy, no cost way is to be a guest on somebody else's podcast, right?
Right. Exactly. And all those things that you talked about are good and valid. However, podcast guesting is pretty unique. It's really one of the only places where there's long form educational content that people stay completely focused on, right? Like a lot of us, when we're driving, we're running, we're almost in like a hypnotic state. We're choosing to listen. So it's not like we're being interrupted. It's not like I'm scrolling through a feed and see something flashy that catches my attention. I'm choosing to engage with that host, listen to their content. And if I'm the one being elevated, like I borrow that host's authority, credibility. Like if the host thinks I'm good enough for their audience, I'm good enough for their audience. And now the audience trusts me. And so in marketing, we're always trying to build know, like, and trust, right? That's the whole point. And so you can do that through 75 touches of Facebook ads, LinkedIn content, everything. Or in one 30-minute interview, you can actually close that whole cycle.
Right.
And then you can take that content and feed the machine of all the other stuff that you want to do, right? Like we take one interview, get some golden nuggets, have short videos, have image quotes, have LinkedIn posts from the interview. Yep. And personally for me, and having done this a lot, I find this really fun. Like I love spending time with you. I like spending time with other hosts. And so this doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like marketing. It's like I get to have really fun conversations. And if you set it up right, have sales pipelines fed from that, have content pipelines fed from that. And you as the entrepreneur, again, if you have the right system, all you have to do is get on shows and talk about yourself, right? And talk about the things you love to talk about as an expert.
Yeah, very much so. And it can be very profitable. So, we have a podcast, Expert Speak. You're on it right now. It's a profitable podcast, meaning it generates revenue for our company every year. When I'm a guest on somebody else's podcast, that too is a profit center because I gain clients when I'm on somebody else's podcast because they're like, oh, I've been thinking about doing a book and I love Dustin. I trust Dustin. He had Michael on. I'm going to call Michael. I get clients through podcast guesting as well.
Yep.
Doesn't cost me any money. I'm just showing up, and I'm showing up to add value to that audience. But this is definitely a way that you can gain clients and expand your sphere of influence. I love your strategy there of taking a podcast, then writing about it on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever. Link it back to that podcast because people are researching before they ever contact you. They're trying to figure you out.
Yeah.
If they can listen to you on somebody's podcast, they get a feel for you, right? Is that been your experience?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's just like a familiarity. Like I have people still reaching out from stuff I've done in 2020. Like those shows still generate leads. People contact me on LinkedIn, or there'll be this thing that happens where it's like we reconnect on LinkedIn. I don't know them from Adam, but they're like, I know you. I've heard your story. Aren't you the snack stick guy? Like I heard you on this show or that show,
Yeah.
and like it clicks. Like, and then I immediately have a relationship, right? Like there's a relationship that's there.
Yeah.
So the long tail nature of this is unique. Also, it's really good for SEO. So if you're interested in search engine optimization, it's backlinks. So like I'll have a backlink from Michael's site. I've been interviewed on Shopify's official podcast. And so like the list goes on, but all those backlinks, all the Apple backlinks, if you search my name, you're going to find a lot of powerful podcast episodes show up at the top of the search results, which again, as you said, people are checking you out. It's really not only did they listen to me, they don't even have to. Just seeing, oh man, he's been on Digital Marketer and he's been on here and he's been on here. Like he really knows his stuff. So.
Yeah. And if you put on your website, after you do a few podcasts, you put on your website a podcast tab and people see that you've been interviewed by 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 people. They're wow, this person's impressive. They obviously know what they're talking about. That elevates your credibility.
Yes.
And so this is not rocket science. This is a great marketing strategy. Here's the problem, Dustin. What do I do? Where do I find podcasts? I don't know what to do. Answer that.
So we work through a 5-step framework. It'd be easy for people to remember because they all start with P. So I'll say them real quick and I'll go through each one briefly. So step 1 is purpose, then plan, then pitch, then perform, then profit, my favorite part. So step 1 is purpose. So before we talk about which shows, we need to answer the question, why would I want to be on a podcast? What's the vision for my business? Who are my clients? You know, what kind of leads do I want? Once you answer that, and the way that you know if you've got it nailed is what's your call to action going to be on the podcast. If you know what that is and it feels really in alignment with your business goals, you've got your purpose nailed. So now you know why you want to be on podcast. Step 2 is plan. That's the research. That's like, okay, now I know why. I need to go find the specific shows I want to be on. And we can talk about examples of how to do that. But what I'll tell your audience if they've never done this is they're initially going to think, I don't know if I can find like 2 or 3, and then they're going to realize there's 2,000 or 3,000, and then they're going to be overwhelmed. And so part of that process is actually how to prioritize all the opportunity because there's a lot of opportunity. And then step 3 is pitch. So now I know which shows I want to be on. How do I get the host to say yes to me? And so like that's how to be compelling, lead with value. And we've got a template we walk through called the perfect pitch podcast template. And then so now they said yes. Step 4 is perform. So like, how do I efficiently prepare? How do I introduce myself? What kind of stories do I tell? What's my call to action? So like, how do you do well as a guest? And then step 5 is profit. So like in my 90-day mastermind, 1/3 of it is the first 4 steps, like how to actually find the shows and systematize that and scale that. Then 2/3 of it's profit. So like now we've nailed some shows and we've got podcast appearances coming out. How do we leverage each of those to grow our network and to make direct sales?
Wow. I love it. The 5 P's of profitable podcast guesting with your host, Dustin Riechmann. There you go. We can have a podcast.
We could.
It's amazing because what you just laid out there is a framework. It's a system. And my audience knows I talk about systems all the time. The other thing that you launched before the 5 P's was SEO. And how many people are still struggling with that? And it's funny, I never really connected the dots until you said that. But if you go to Google and type in my name, I mean, there are like pages of me. And I think a lot of that has been because of all the podcasts I've been on over the last year and a half, along with other things that I do. But those things are always linking back. And so people are searching for you. And if you want to be found and be seen as an expert at what you do, podcast guesting is a phenomenal, low cost, very quick. You could get on a podcast in the next week, probably. Right. But you need to understand it's not just getting on a podcast. It really does you need to understand your purpose. You need a plan. You got to know the pitch. How do you get that because they get pitched by everybody, right? Oh
yeah. And we all receive those horrible emails, those horrible direct messages that you ignore immediately, right? So we're the antithesis to that.
That's right. And then how do you perform? You're going there. Yeah, you want to talk about yourself, but you want to talk about yourself in the context of that audience and bring value for that host. And then how do you make profit? Yeah, all of that. So a 5-step process. You got to talk a little bit about your mastermind. You got a 90-day mastermind. That's the other thing I love about podcast guesting is that it is not a long-term, it's going to take me forever to figure this out. No, you can kind of be up and running very quickly, right? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and it's if you do it, that's one objection people have is where do I start? And another objection is I've been on shows, I can't make money. And probably the third big one is doesn't seem scalable, like compared to Facebook ads and the other things we think about when we think about investing in marketing. And so we address those in this mastermind, and I call it the Podcast Profits Accelerator. So it's about being a guest, and it's about doing it profitably. That's the whole promise, is adding a 6-figure marketing channel to your business as a podcast guest. And so, as I mentioned, we talk at first about the purpose, plan, pitch, and perform. So like, how do you actually get on shows and do well? And that's like the first 30 days. So within the first 30 days, people are getting yeses on shows or booking interviews, and we get that rolling. Then the very next thing we do is show them how to outsource that. So I lead the entrepreneur through it because I want them to own it and understand it and define their purpose and know how to perform well and all that. But the steps 2 and 3 are the time consuming part of this process, which is researching and pitching. So once the entrepreneur has got that nailed, now we can use a virtual assistant to run that kind of on autopilot from the standpoint of the entrepreneur for 5 to 10 hours a week. Our goal is typically to be featured once a week on average. And that's like the system we put in place.
Yep.
You can vary that depending on how many leads you need and things like that. But once a week in front of a new audience, developing a relationship with a new host, you've now got 50 new relationships and audiences that are familiar with you in just a year, which is very, very powerful. It's pretty easy to do the math to get over 6 figures pretty quickly when you do that. But to make that sustainable for a busy entrepreneur, you need help. And so we help you hire a VA. And then if you already have one, or after you hire them, we train them for you as part of the accelerator experience. So that's kind of the thing we do right after. And then after that, it's all about different ways to leverage these things. So we set up sales funnels, like sales pipelines. We set up, or we spend a lot of time on offer optimization. So entrepreneurs will come in, they've got their flagship offer. Well, you're in a group, I limit these to 12 people. So you're in a group with 11 other like ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who are growing their business, and they're all interested in podcast guesting. So they're relationship focused, they're articulate, they have good stories to tell. And so you get to be spoken into, not just by me, but 11 other people, about how can we make your offer better? How can we make your messaging more clear? And so we spend time doing that. And then we kind of close out our 90-day experience with, now we got a system running all the time. And then we try to shortcut that whole process with referrals. So we kind of, at the end, we do business to business referrals, and we do podcast referrals. Like, hey, I was on these 5 shows. You're appropriate for 3 of them. Let me make an introduction. So that the system's running as it should. But then you can kind of like, my goal is to get an ROI for the entrepreneur from the group itself without even having to be on a podcast. But of course, they're running the podcast system. And we do all that in 90 days. And I know, Michael, you understand the power of masterminds. It's the thing you're learning is important. What's actually the most valuable is the relationships and the community within the mastermind itself.
That's right. And the thinking that comes out of that, right? The mastermind
I'm
mindset. In, I keep myself and put myself there because of the level of thinking, because that's the thing. But if you can come into a 90-day mastermind, learn a podcasting system like this, have it all up and running in a very short period of time, and understand the value of being the expert, and realize there are literally thousands of podcasts. I mean, we were on one system running podcasts. For me to be a guest on podcasts, we had to turn it off. We were getting so many people wanting me. My calendar was too full. I was just guesting all the time. I've got a business to run. So it can get overwhelming. That's why you need somebody like Dustin, who understands the overarching purpose. It's not about just getting on podcasts. There are way too many of them. It's your purpose, having a plan, knowing the pitch, knowing what to say to get an invitation on that, to perform well, to be articulate, to tell good stories. And then how do you profit from it? Because there is a methodology there. And if you will do podcasting that way, you're going to generate 6 figures. It's going to be fun. It's going to be something you're going to love to do. So that's the 5 Ps of a profitable podcast guesting system. Dustin runs this mastermind, the Podcast Profits Accelerator. I love that.
You got it. Nailed it.
Because that's really what he wants to do, is accelerate your profits, put in a system where you literally can generate 6 figures a year for your business. We do it. We're not that good. I mean, it's just, I'm not that special. Anybody can do it, but you need a guide to get you there. And that's what Dustin said. I love what you said. We lead you through it so you can own it. Yes. And that's exactly what he does. I cannot emphasize enough, as you are running this year, the next year, the year after, podcasting is here to stay, folks. And you need to do both. You really need to have your own, but you need to be on other people's podcasts. Low investment, high payoff. Dustin, I cannot recommend you high enough. Tell people where can they find you to get a little bit more information about your accelerator program or just you in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. Very, very kind words, Michael. SimpleSuccessCoaching.com is my main hub. And my email address. I'm a very transparent guy. So if you have a question, you're interested in the accelerator, you just need a recommendation for something else. It's Dustin, which is Dustin at SimpleSuccessCoaching.com. I'm also super active at LinkedIn. So if you look up Dustin Riechmann, which is Riech over on LinkedIn, happy to connect over there as well.
That's awesome. SimpleSuccessCoaching.com is where you're going to get more information. All that, we're going to have all that in the show notes too, so they can check it out. But to understand his mastermind, the podcast Profits Accelerator, and how you can really set up a marketing system in your business where you are the featured expert on other people's podcasts to engage with their audience, to share your knowledge, and to gain more clients. It's a phenomenal marketing strategy. I'm behind it 100%. And Dustin, thank you for being a guest on Expert Speak.
It's my honor, Michael. It's been a blast, as we thought it would be.
We knew it was going to be great. Yeah,
it's fun, right? It's a fun way to market. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of do it in action, do it in front of your audience, so they can see just how easy and fun it can be to grow your business this way.
Absolutely, yeah. We can all talk about our business all day, right? Let's just do it in a profitable way, and podcast guesting is by far one of the best ways to do it. So, thank you, sir. Profitable. Podcasting at SimpleSuccessCoaching.com. Dustin, you go and have yourself a great week, my friend.
You too.